episode of Save Corrupted, a podcast about video game history, archival, and why video games are worth preserving in the first place. My name is Liam, your host as always, and today I'm joined with a special guest, Josh McCloud of Fox fame. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Excellent. How is old Fox, by the way?
I'm sorry, you completely throw me with that. I'm like, what? I thought you were talking about Fox as in like 20th century Fox. I'm like, what? No, I've got no affiliation with them. Oh, Fox McCloud. Right, now I'm following.
No affiliation.
Jesus.
Alright, well, after that disaster of an opener, let's get on to our topic of Warcraft 3 we're talking about today. A classic RTS from 2002. Now, this is an episode in which, unlike the first one we did on Dark Souls, I'm probably going to have to lean on you a bunch, because RTS games are not my forte at all.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
They're one of the genres I habitually don't play, because I've never been able to wrap my mind around them.
Ah, man, missing out.
I know. I've heard like a lot of RTS fans explain the concept to me, and it sounds cool, but like every time I try and play it, I'm just trying to get my base up, organise everything, and then 10 minutes, I get overrun, and I can never figure out how to sort it out.
Oh, man, don't get me wrong, I'm terrible at RTSs. Like, I love them, they're probably my favourite genre. Like, that and RPGs are pretty much equal for me, but I'm no good at them. Like, the single-player campaign is what I commit time to. I've played a bit of multiplayer with games like StarCraft, but only little flirtations here and there, because I'm terrible at them too. But the story's there, that's what I play for. So, and I think in the case of Warcraft and StarCraft, I think it does dumb it down and make it a bit more accessible to, non-RTS fans, so that it's like you could maybe try and give it a go. There's some more RPG elements in Warcraft 3 as well, less large-scale manipulation of forces and more like small-scale squads and all that make it a bit easier to get into.
Mm-hmm.
You're missing out, but it'll depend on the game. I wouldn't recommend playing something like Command & Conquer or something like that, but Warcraft, I think anybody could play Warcraft.
Oof. In preparation for the show, I tried to look for a copy of Warcraft 3, but you can't actually buy it from the Blizzard store now because they're spruiking the remaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, and that's not out yet, obviously. So I bought Warcraft 2 on GOG.
Yeah.
And I gave that a go, and just couldn't get into it. I couldn't figure out how to do it.
I'll admit now, I came into the franchise at Warcraft 3 and then went back and played Warcraft 2, so like real die-hard fans of Warcraft are going to be like, why the hell are we listening to this guy? Never played Warcraft 1. I've read into the story retrospectively after playing Warcraft 3. I've played Warcraft 2, but not the expansion, so I'm a bit all over the shop as well.
Right.
But, Warcraft 2 was a completely different kettle of fish, so I can't sort of talk to that, but Warcraft 3, I'm really hanging out for that remaster. I've been wanting to replay it. Warcraft 3 is a game that I probably replay at least once a year, every year. And I've had that itch for probably the last 6 months, but now I'm forced to wait for the remaster because I've just, there's no point playing it again now to only play it in another 6 months' time or what have you.
Right.
But the fact that it's not available at all is a pain. Especially for new fans like yourself that would just want to give it a go now.
Exactly.
But, and they announced it. Oh, shit, I can't even remember when. Can we swear on this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. They announced it like late last year or like 3/4 of the way through last year, and then now it's just like, it'll come on or before December 2019. It's just like, why tell me that early? It's like, I get building hype and all that sort of stuff, but it's just like, I'd rather not torture myself for more than a year waiting for a game that I've already played before and want to play now.
Yeah. No, I totally get you, man.
Yeah.
Well, something I am more familiar with is turn-based strategy games. So I kind of draw a lot of analogies between the turn-based stuff that I have enjoyed playing, like XCOM, the remake, and Civilization.
Yeah.
So those are pretty good games. The differences between, say, like a turn-based strategy game and a real-time strategy game, or an RTS, for those who don't know, seems to be pretty much contained in the name. In one, you take turns, like a board game, and in the other, you have to respond in real time. But it seems to me that they both require a pretty different approach to gameplay, and the player objectives are pretty different in turn-based and RTS games. Could you maybe talk for a little bit about what you see the key difference between turn-based and RTS strategy?
I think because I enjoy turn-based strategy as well. Like, I enjoy the Civilization games, but I've never quite gotten into them on the same level that I have with RTSs. And I think a big part of it is just that the actual RTS where you're controlling your units, say in a game like Total War where it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in the campaign map, it's turn-based, and then if you choose to go to a battle, it'll be RTS. I think turn-based strategy is more... It leans on the strategic sort of acumen of the player a bit more. You've got to think ahead and plan things a bit more, whereas with an RTS, even if your planning's poor, if your execution is better than your opponent, then you can still make up for it in some regard. Whereas, turn-based, I think, it leans more on having your strategy sorted from the start.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think that an RTS involves, like, it might reward spontaneous decision-making a bit more?
It could. I mean, at high levels, like, I watched some competitive play with StarCraft and all that sort of stuff, and when you get to that level, like, you're talking, like, down to the second, getting your production ready, and if you haven't built this thing by, 2 minutes, 32 seconds, then you're completely screwed, or it's going to put you on the back foot. But again, I think it's forgiving enough that somebody that, is quick thinking and, can what would you call it? Adapt in that moment can sort of make up for it. Whereas with a turn-based strategy, it's kind of like if you make strategic mistakes, there's not really a lot of room to make up for it in just sheer mechanical skill with your actions per minute or anything like that. It's just like, well, you just made a mistake, pal. Now you got to wear it.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
So,
well, on that issue, Warcraft 3 is a game that's difficult to kind of summarise without getting into the nitty-gritty. So, would you mind explaining for my listeners, in case they aren't familiar, how is a typical game sort of organised, and what are your objectives in a typical game?
So, I mean, are we talking multiplayer or just say?
Let's say multiplayer.
So just a skirmish or something like that.
Yeah, just a skirmish. So not the campaign.
Well, again, I mean, because the main focus for my playthrough of any RTS has mainly been single player, because as I said before, I actually suck when it comes to multiplayer. But I'd imagine it's similar to what I just said before with like StarCraft competitive play, that it's you need to have that optimal sort of first 5 minutes of base building and expansion and knowing what resources to collect and what buildings to build when and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it's just down to timing.
Yeah.
And then I guess expansion seems to be the key thing. It's like economy control comes first.
Okay. What does that involve?
So in Warcraft's actually interesting as well, because you have hero units. So not only do you have to manage your base and your armies, so you've got different resources, you've got gold and lumber, you've got the population cap that you need to build houses or what have you to increase how many units you can build.
Right.
So you've got to manage those, and then obviously you have to micromanage the units that you're creating, but then you also have a hero character that has level progression.
Right.
So in a standard map, you'd have your enemy force that you're facing off against, say, another player or AI or what have you. But then scattered around the map are camps of just NPC creeps and stuff that you can go out and kill with your hero to gain experience. So while you're managing your base, you're also trying to run your hero out and kill things, and you'll get other resources and goodies along the way, but probably the biggest boon is just getting that experience up to level your hero to make him more powerful, because again, in a game like Warcraft, this is why I was drawn to it as well, being not so good at RTS, is that again, if you have a powerful hero character that can turn the tide of a battle, perhaps if you haven't quite got enough numbers, or you can't micromanage your units as well, if you've got that strong hero character there, and you can manage to maybe take theirs out, then it might put you in an advantageous position. So it's weird. It's a bit different to a lot of other RTSs and how they play out, because you're split between a couple of different things. It's like a hybrid sort of version of RPG and RTS.
Yeah.
It gives you more options, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it sort of sounded like your explanation sounded like you've dropped a kind of mini Diablo within a standard RTS game, and you have to try and like manage those two systems. Yeah,
and it's funny as well, because it shows where my focus is, because you asked me about how you start off with an RTS, and I've then gone on to talk about the heroes and leveling up and all that. So obviously the RPG elements appeal far more to me than the economy management and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah.
It's a cool combination, but I suppose, even regardless of that, having the hero and all, the main thing is just map control. You want to be scouting, you want visibility everywhere, you want to know where your enemies are, You want to know if they're expanding. You want to try and beat them to expansions. You don't want to expand too soon and leave yourself vulnerable. All those sorts of things. But you basically want your population growing, the amount of units that you have growing, and just keep everything in step with each other. So you don't have a blob of resources sitting there doing nothing. It's like you're making money and you're spending money and you're turning it over and keeping everything economic and efficient and all that sort of stuff. So again, if you just want to sit back and chill and run your hero around and kill creeps, you're going to miss out on doing that sort of stuff, which is going to put you on the back foot later. But so that and again that's fairly universal. So that's RTS essentially. Like I think, and watching a lot of competitive stuff seems to be economy management, and then late game when it comes time to actually come to a head and fight, then it comes more down to micromanagement and how coordinated you can be in splitting your forces and all your actions per minute and all that sort of stuff, which is where I fall apart. I do not have anywhere near enough actions per minute to be able to compete with people that are even half good at the game. So. Okay. Yeah, my only hope would be it's like I just make a blob and I send my blob at their blob and hope my blob wins and that's it.
So you mentioned the concept of actions per minute. I'm sure that to a non-RTS player that doesn't sound particularly meaningful. Okay, so you're doing clicking a certain amount of times per minute. What exactly does that measure? So
just anything really. So making sure that because like if you're just sitting back idly. Watching your numbers tick up, because a lot of things happen automatically. You set your little workers to chop wood or get gold, and then you have your building queues as you're building things or building units, and you don't want to be sitting back idle. It's like you constantly want to be doing something. And I think a lot of players, like I've got a friend that plays, and I see him playing, and he'll just constantly click. Even if he's doing nothing, he'll just click just to keep his muscles moving and everything, so that when the action does start, he's ready to go.
Okay.
Because there will be times where you are idle, but you want to stay sort of on the edge and ready to go and all that sort of stuff. But it also encourages you to keep doing something, to sit there and just be like, oh, I've got enough gold, I'll just sit there and let that pool. It's like, as I said before, it's you want it ticking over. You want to have resources coming in and resources going out. And if you're running out of space or you're running out of resources or you're running out of population, then you need to expand. So there's always something for you to be doing. So, yeah, just having that ability to click around the map and keep things going simultaneously. You quickly go back to your base, you use a couple of hotkeys so that you don't have to spend a lot of time there because you want to be looking at the map, you want to be focusing on your forces that you have moving around as opposed to sitting there looking at your base and watching your workers grab gold because you really don't need to be doing that.
Okay, I think I've realised my mistake. That seems a lot like my playstyle.
Yeah, and it's the same with me. It's like, and with other genres as well, like MOBAs, which we we'll probably end up talking about a bit later as well. But like, I just have terrible map awareness, absolutely shocking map awareness, and I like games, which is why I like RPGs as much as I do, because I hyper-focus on a task. I find it very difficult to split my focus between things, which is very much why I enjoy just playing single-player campaign, enjoy the story. I do enjoy RTSs and the mechanics of it, but when it comes time to compete against another human, I don't have the ability to split that concentration to be able to do it effectively.
Yeah.
So I like to enjoy it. I like to just a nice slow, like, can't we just build our bases, put some towers in, and you throw your wall of dudes against me so I can see how awesome my defenses go? It's like, that's not... It's cool to do that in single player, but against humans it just never works. Because
too devastating.
Well, they're just too rude. They come in, you've got 2 towers up, and they come in and destroy one before you've built it, and it's like, no, you're supposed to attack later, not now. I'm not ready. Go away.
There's a manners to this. Yeah. Well, that's pretty. It's really interesting, actually, the way that you kind of describe that sort of interest. Because I was thinking about in preparation for the episode. Because I play a lot of action games, and the action games typically sit you in a kind of very, you're proximate to whatever is going on. It's very narrow and close. Your point of view is pretty close to whatever you're doing. Whereas the very nature of a real-time strategy game kind of compels you to adopt a broader, more remote perspective.
Yeah.
And so it seems to translate into what sort of skills or what sort of attitudes you need to adopt towards what you're doing. In an action game, you can afford to become emotionally invested in what your individual character is doing, because the entire history of the game has led your character to this point.
Yeah.
Whereas with an RTS, even one which involves a kind of semi-RPG system like the heroes in Warcraft 3, it seems to me that you can't be terribly invested in any particular thing that's going on.
Yeah.
So your point of view is that of the universe, and so you're interested in the broader question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's funny, because I suppose there's a different satisfaction that comes out of building something large and expansive, and you look at, even if you just look at the mini-map and you see your little colour, all the little green dots, and how much of the map you've expanded and spread, and so there's a certain satisfaction in looking at everything that you've built. But it is funny, though, because for me personally, it's kind of like, I do still find ways to become emotionally invested in even the smallest little unit.
Yeah?
It's like, because you get kill counts on some of your units. So I would sit there and I'd look at certain characters, like you've got a squad of archers or what have you, and I'll click through to see which one of those archers has had the most kills. And there's no purpose to that whatsoever. There's no advantage to doing that. There's no experience gained for minions.
Yeah.
But I just like to know. It's like, well, who got the most kills out of it? Oh, look, this chick got 20 kills. She'll be like the lieutenant. And I'll give them little stories, and then, it's just, so you create the investment yourself, but that's just, I don't know, that's if you're a story nerd like me, but I suppose a lot of RTS players wouldn't give a shit.
That's really interesting, actually. It kind of reminds me of the sort of paternal instinct that takes over when I play a game like Pokemon.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that you kind of sketch these little narratives of your time together.
Yeah.
With these little dudes under your control.
Yeah.
And you begin to feel invested in that sort of sense. Like, I do feel kind of like a dad to my Pokemon.
Yeah.
And so I get the sort of sense in, like, watching a unit that you built at the start of the game, managing to survive through most of the game, and then developing skills and growing up and doing, maybe that unit was instrumental in a particularly important fight over a choke point or something.
Yeah.
Or in capturing a strategic resource. And you can say, wow, these archers, they've come so far.
Yeah, that's it. And I find it interesting as well, because it's sort of like, and I suppose this goes to the broader stuff that you're probably looking to tackle with your podcast in general, in how people engage with games and what it means to individuals and all that sort of stuff, because I think, and this happens in many forms with video games, but in this particular instance, it's kind of like, even when the mechanics don't offer you any reason to care about that unit, it's like we with our own human brains find ways to attach meaning to things, and we add layers to games that were never intended by design to begin with. We just fill in the blanks ourselves. So we can give a story to a nameless archer number 22 or what have you, just because they did one cool thing, or maybe they got 2 more kills than the next archer or something.
Yeah.
And it's, there's nothing in the game design that encourages you to do that or rewards you for doing that, but you get your own personal satisfaction out of it, which I find interesting, just the things that people can do in lots of different forms and lots of different genres, but the narratives that we make in our own heads that aren't actually built into the game. Yeah.
I think it speaks maybe to our kind of intrinsic desire to tell stories.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely for me as well, because I do actually write, just as a hobby. I'm not published or anything, just for the listeners out there. So I don't arrogantly sort of sit here and go, I'm a writer, but I do write. I have written a book, and, I've got 5 or 6 different projects on the go and all that sort of stuff. So I do, a lot of the video games that I play, I'm digesting the story and the characters, and I'm taking inspiration, and and again, I'm thinking up, with that example I was talking about before, where you fill in the gaps with your own narrative. I have a lot of fun with that. Yeah. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but you mentioned XCOM before. XCOM's one of my favourite games to do that with, and it's the sole reason I cannot play that game on Iron Man mode, is because I will just meticulously customise every single soldier that I have. I'll give them names, nicknames, I'll even write their bios out, I'll build this whole backstory. So I don't want to watch them die, I don't want to play Iron Man, it's like someone dies, I'm reloading. Yep. So, and again, it's just that, I mean, that is kind of built into the game. I don't know if they intended for people to really care that much, but I had a lot of fun with that, and it had very little impact on the game, what name the character had. You could have just called them Soldier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not give them any bio, and you'd have the same experience. But, for me personally, it was just something silly that I like to do.
That's really interesting. It kind of brings to mind the old idea that if you want someone to overcome prejudice, the idea is that you stick them together with a person that's a representative of the group to which they have the prejudice, or towards which they're prejudiced. And the idea is that simply existing with another person, doing something along with them, sharing a kind of a moment in time together, encourages you to empathise them in a certain way. I mean, there are downsides to that certain view, but I think it speaks to something which is true, which is that human beings, it seems to me, we can't help but form attachments to those people that we spend our lives with. Even if it's a short period, even if it's some person that you're talking to on a bus. You're going to form an attachment to that certain person. You might think about them 5 years later and be like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. We had a really interesting conversation about jazz on the bus. Or something like that.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the attachments that you form, for example, to your soldiers in XCOM, just for the listeners listening, XCOM is a turn-based strategy game in which your soldiers, you can give them names or customize them, but even if you don't, if a soldier dies in a mission, they are dead permanently. And so you mentioned Iron Man difficulty. That's the difficulty that prevents you from manually saving, right?
Yeah. So it auto saves and there's no take backsies.
Yes. So you can't. Yeah. So if your favorite person dies, you can't then load a previous save file to cancel it out.
Yeah.
So you are stuck with the consequences of a bad dice roll or whatever. Like in that way, it's meant to be kind of more realistic, but it's too brutal for me. I can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Precisely because we form these attachments. Like when I played XCOM recently, I formed an attachment to my sniper.
Yeah.
And I just had this like I started the game with her and I took her to the very end. I refused to play on that higher difficulty mode. Precisely because I was terrified about getting a bad dice roll and then having her be gone, having her her name only appearing in my obituaries list. And then having someone else to take her place, because no one can do what she had done. No one could have carried me as far as she helped to carry me. Yeah. And so it's like even in an RTS, all these little units, you have a kind of relationship with them in that sense, or at least I don't know. Maybe players like you and I, we just, and I don't think we are alone in this. I think that it may be what a lot of players like about the genre. Is our capacity to project ourselves in a certain sense onto the characters and form a sort of a parasocial relationship with them, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, I think for the most part, I mean, again, a bit of a tangent to get away from video games and just talking about the connection part. I think the default of most people is that they want to connect with other people. So, there's all kinds of obstacles to why people can or can't connect to begin with. But as you said, you find a common goal and then, people learn to cooperate and there's that connection that's formed. But I think maybe an overly optimistic viewpoint. But I think the default is to want connections. I mean, we're a social species. We've evolved to be social. We're not solitary creatures. So, there is that instinct there. And maybe video games tap into that, or any medium that we sort of absorb. Whether you're reading a book, you attach you attach emotional connection to characters, that are completely you haven't even seen, and there's no visual representation of them.
Yes,
and yet you still love them and miss them when they're gone, and even if they don't die in the book, but the moment you close the book and they're gone, that's it. You feel a sense of loss, and But, I mean, to bring it back to Warcraft, getting away from just those individual little archers and all the minions and stuff, I think another reason why Warcraft is such a great series is because it does have this awesome suite of characters that, you don't have to make up your own narrative, because there are these amazingly designed characters in there with these great personalities and great plot lines, and the interaction between all of them is just amazing. And to me, that's why, I enjoy RTS as a genre, but Warcraft and StarCraft are definitely up there as my favourites, just because of the characters that are in it and the interactions between them all. And, Command and Conquer's cool, there's plenty of cool stuff going on, and there's the nod and the GDI and the good guys versus the bad guys and all that stuff, but it's but I don't really care about the characters that are driving the story.
Yeah.
It's very much about one nation state against another sort of not quite nation state or what have you. Whereas, Warcraft and StarCraft very much more focused on... It's like a personal story arc enveloped in a war narrative, I suppose, that you control, all these units, but ultimately the story isn't about the units, it's about your hero character and what's happening there and what the general plot is. Okay.
So the hero characters that you mentioned in the game are connected to the game's broader narrative, are they?
Yeah, so in the single-player campaign, so with multiplayer that we were talking about before, basically you get generic versions of characters that are specific to the story. So let's say, for the humans, that you get a paladin. So in single-player, that's Arthas, who's the hero that starts off Warcraft 3. But if you were to play the multiplayer version of it, you just get a generic, randomly generated named paladin that is now your hero. So. Okay. And again, it's each race that you play has their own sort of champion or hero or what have you, and then there's a supporting cast of heroes and all that. So I think, it's a choice between 3 different heroes. That's right. It's been a while since I've actually played multiplayer, but you'll either start with one or the other. There's 3 different heroes that are basically just generic versions of characters that you've played in the campaign.
Yeah. Okay. So the way that storytelling is typically done in an action game, for example, or an RPG, is that you have a section of gameplay. You might have some dialogue or some extra information that provides a bit more depth or nuance to the general story. But usually you'll be playing a section, and then the section will come to a stop or come to a pause, and you'll have a bit of story exposition or something vital will happen. The game will kind of wrest control away from you. You'll watch a cutscene or some other kind of relevant narrative device. So the kind of traditional understanding of how a story progresses through the course of a game is sort of like a roller coaster with wooden blocks along the track, so to speak. Stop and start.
Yeah.
So you carry on, stop, time to get some more information, carry on, stop. And, that's pretty familiar. And so a lot of people have criticised that particular mode because they argue it's inauthentic to games. That, like, storytelling methods that are unique to games are kind of like this, what I mentioned in the Dark Souls episode, the kind of archaeological or environmental storytelling.
The story just comes at you and it's shown rather than told, and you can engage with it as much as you want, or you can ignore it as much as you want.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Kind of. Yeah. There's that old saying from film and television, or literature in general. Show don't tell.
Yeah.
Show don't tell. But with regard to games, it's often been rephrased as do don't show.
Yeah.
Which is, I think there is a place for showing, and I think there is also a place for telling. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say that, because one of my favourite series ever is Metal Gear Solid, and that's a story with a lot of telling. But with regard to RTS, I was always somewhat baffled at how that particular kind of method of storytelling would be translated into a game like that.
Yeah.
I then understood a little bit more after playing some Warcraft 2. I played some of the campaign.
Yeah.
And so it seems to be like, if you were to chronicle a war story, you might, for example, take a kind of broad historical view, and the individual bits where we actually get to connect to the story are, if a battle of great importance is happening, or, some important political event, which is going to change the development of the war. And it seems like that was what was happening in Warcraft 2. The game did seem to presume that you had played Warcraft 1, which I had not.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit lost at the beginning of the story, but basically it seemed to imply that there was a conflict between the orcs and the humans were routed. And the orcs are kind of pursuing them to this new place where they're trying to get set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the story missions that I played, I didn't play through the whole campaign.
Yeah.
But it seemed to be like, okay, we're following the humans and we're seeing how they are trying to re-establish themselves so they can resist the orcs and, gain their own independence, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, do you think that, each individual mission was kind of sandwiched between some bits of story exposition? Is that sort of how it works in Warcraft 3?
Yeah, so it was interesting the way that you sort of said it before, because, again, I hadn't quite thought about it in that way. Because, I enjoy lots of different genres, and, games like Dark Souls are, some of my favourite. I love that form of storytelling that's very organic and just happens in the moment. You're not having control taken away from you for cutscenes or anything, or if they are, they're very short. And it's very hands-on experience of it. Whereas with RTS, it's actually the level, the actual battle that you're doing is almost irrelevant. Really, there's not a lot of plot advancement happens in the levels. Occasionally, there might be something, you'll have an objective and you'll take a character there, and there'll be a little, their little portrait will come up and start talking down the bottom part of the screen, and there'll be some text come up, and they might say a few lines of dialogue. But essentially, the story is told in the cutscenes in between, and then it's broken up. You play a level that's not connected to the last level you played at all. It's very disjointed. It's just, there's nothing that you did in the last level is going to have any effect on what you do in this level. So, yeah, a lot of the plot advancement happens in between, in gaps. So, I suppose when you really think about it, the actual levels themselves, you could just replace with footnotes of, and then there was this battle, and there were 100 soldiers, and yada, yada, yada. Which, I suppose, with what you were saying before about that, our view of history, it's kind of the same as that, really, because we would talk about the footnotes of history in all the machinations that would happen in between great battles, and then a battle sort of comes in and it seems to be just, it's almost viewed as a separate entity in and of itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't, say, drive what's happening, but it's just it's a part of what's happening, but it's separate to it. You could look at history through the lens of I want to look at the battle and the strategies and the tactics used or what have you, or you could look at it and be not interested in the battles and all and just go, well, no, I want to know what was happening with the politics and what was going on behind the scene. And I guess, with Warcraft 3, it's kind of, it's that same disjointed aspect of it. It's you You get the best of both worlds. You get to play the level, you get to build up your forces, and again, you get invested in the narrative or whatever's said in the cutscene beforehand or whatever's happening in the plot at the time.
Yeah.
Now you get to live that out whether you're on the back foot and you're defending against hordes of undead, and you get to feel that desperation as you mount your defense and all that sort of stuff. Or if you're playing as the undead and you're running in and slaughtering someone, you get to feel like the god king of death, and it's... So the story's being told to you, but then it gives you a chance to enjoy some aspect of being part of it, I guess. But, but all in all, I guess, Jesus, the cinematics and all that are amazing in Warcraft as well. Like, I could quite happily just watch it all as this story that unfolds in front of me and quite happily not play the game. Which isn't to say I don't enjoy the game, but it's just that the story is that good, and there's not a lot that actually happens in the levels itself to really make it relevant. So for you, I'd say, if you're not going to play it, you could easily watch videos and get, at least 50%, like the plot part, just from watching the cinematics and the cutscenes in between the levels and all that sort of stuff, without actually having to touch the game. You won't really be missing anything story-wise.
Okay. Well, I am interested in giving the game a little go when the remaster comes out, so I'm hoping maybe that'll turn me into a fan.
Yes, I hope so.
Because I am eager to see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah.
But it's a kind of an interesting comment. I mean, I think there's a kind of a methodological question as to exactly how fair it is to criticize a game from the early 2000s for modes of storytelling which were thoroughly conventional for the time. Because you go to a lot of games that were contemporaneous with Warcraft 3, and you wouldn't find much of a difference. You'd find it translated into modes which suit the genre that the game appears in, but more or less it was the same kind of design philosophy, that there was this kind of an unofficial sort of iron curtain between the progression of gameplay and interest in the systems and the narrative as it's told to you. I think in more recent years, developers have been more conscious in trying to tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev, and make gameplay a bit more organic and serve narrative in that sense. In a certain, to use a kind of lame analogy, to make sure that form and content have a more kind of organic relationship to each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, so there's a question as to how fair it is for us to criticise Warcraft 3 for that. But on that same note, say if you were sitting down with a development studio and saying, we're going to develop a new RTS. We're going to take some inspiration from Warcraft 3, how that game works. But let's think of a new way to tell a narrative in an RTS. How would you go about telling a story in an ideal way using an RTS? Oh,
man. Well, it's a hard question to answer because as much as I was sort of talking about how disjointed the story was before, it's like by no means was that a complaint on my part. It could be called a criticism, but it's that I enjoyed that format. When I'm playing the game, I want to be playing the game, and especially with Blizzard because their cinematics are so beautiful. They're so... just the music, the visuals, everything's great. And for 14-year-old me or whatever I was at the time, it blew my mind getting to watch these cinematics of, orcs and humans battling it out, and it looked so real. So I had no problem with that sort of disjointed nature. If anything, the cinematics were almost a reward. You finish a campaign, and then you get a cinematic at the end of it that's your reward for, the last, 6 to 8 hours that you put into that campaign.
Oh, right.
To say, this is the culmination of your efforts, and then you're given this awesome cutscene where all these cool things happen. So I did quite enjoy that, and again, that's just across the board with Blizzard. I almost play those games to see the next cinematic.
Kind of like a fighting game, then.
Yeah. So if anything, I couldn't really suggest that many improvements. I mean, other than some base level stuff. And again, it's up to taste. For me, I really enjoy the RPG elements of it. So I would say more customization with your hero, an increased level cap or something like that. Or,
right.
Just more ability to expand on, more control over the expansion of their abilities, and maybe get to choose between options a bit more and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm quite happy with the format of just, give me more cinematics, give me more awesome stuff to watch. It's like I'll play 2 or 3 hours of turtling up and building shit that, I could probably do in 20 minutes if I just blitzed it. But, I take my time with these long levels and I, build up an absolutely unbeatable force and then dominate the enemy, and I do that 8 or 10 times or however many levels are in the campaign.
Yeah.
And then at the end I get to sit back and enjoy a really awesome cinematic. So, if anything, I'd just be happy with it sort of retaining the same formula, but just give us more cinematics. Just give us more. Make the Metal Gear Solid version of Warcraft. It's I want 6 hours of cinematics going on. It's I want to sit back and watch a movie of Warcraft in between playing a game of Warcraft.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, alright. That's a curious approach to it. So it seems like, in having a look at the genre as a whole, it seems to me that Warcraft 3 was more or less the first RTS to introduce the concept of the hero, and so tried and blend an RPG sort of esque approach with a traditional base management, micromanaging sort of gameplay loop.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they were the first to do it, but they were certainly the ones to do it, probably the best, I suppose. They really nailed the formula.
Yeah.
Which then became a norm going forward in a lot of other RTS games, but, so they may not have been the first, but they definitely did it the best at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, so, that's an interesting point. It's, kind of like the distinction between, a lot of people may refer spiritually to Doom as the first FPS, while knowing that they were technically predecessors.
Yeah.
But in the sense that Doom helped to develop the genre as we know it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, Warcraft 3 did that in so many different ways for, multiple genres now. Or not Warcraft 3, I should say specifically, but just Warcraft as a franchise.
So it seems like the introduction of the hero system was such an innovation, or particularly the way that Warcraft 3 did it. Was such that basically the ideal RTS narrative device would not be implementation of a different system, but just a kind of deepening or increasing complexity of the system that already exists.
Yeah, I mean, especially, if you could be given multiple scalable heroes, it's kind of like you just have the one hero that you have level up, and then you've just got your armies. Because that was one thing that I do enjoy about other RTSs that Warcraft and StarCraft were missing out on is experience gained for the units themselves. Squads actually gaining experience and strengthening up, even just like giving a tiny little boost to how much damage they do because they've survived X amount of battles or what have you. So something like that could be cool to implement into it.
Works pretty well in Civilization.
Yeah, I do really like that. And again, it gives you that extra layer of investment in your units so that you're not just going to charge 100 soldiers in and then have them all wiped out and go, I'll just build another 100, because it's like, well, if there's experience attached to those, then there's a certain time investment with those ones, and you're not going to be as willing to just throw them away.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's take a kind of broader view, stepping outside of Warcraft 3 for just a minute. So the RTS is a concept. Kind of emerges in the late 80s, early 90s, experiences a huge boom in the 90s.
Yeah.
So the 90s is like the decade of the RTS.
The good old days.
The good old days.
Yeah.
So you have many big names in the genre begin to be established in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like Command & Conquer, Age of Empires, StarCraft, and Warcraft, funnily enough. And so Warcraft 3 appears at the turn of the 21st century, in 2002. So I think it's fair to say that the RTS, which has always been at home on PC pretty much, given partly due to the unique control system that it demands of you, was gradually overtaken in importance by the MMO and the FPS on those platforms throughout the 2000s. So do you think that that's an accurate picture of the RTS's rise and slide from prominence? And if so, what lessons might Warcraft 3 offer for aspiring developers who want to recapture the spirit of RTSs in the 90s?
Oh, man. Well, at the risk of insulting a lot of listeners out there, it's like, don't pander to console peasants. Just make an RTS for PCs.
Yep.
Don't dumb down the controls. If you want to make your RTS for consoles, go for it. But it's just like, no, there's complexity that's required, and, I don't know, it just... Well, actually, I will say, though, just a quick caveat there, it's funny... I'll have to admit that growing up, I didn't have a computer until I was probably 12 or 13 or something.
Yeah.
So the first time I ever played Command & Conquer was actually on Nintendo 64.
Wow.
And the first time I ever played StarCraft was on Nintendo 64. So actually getting to play those games on PC, because obviously it was limited to the cartridge, so you got a very base level of the game. It's like you didn't have spoken dialogue or anything. It was all text that you'd have to read. And there were no cinematics. So, let's say StarCraft, the first time I picked that up and actually played that through on the PC, it was like, oh my god, these characters have voices and they're all talking and shit. And there's cinematics at the end of every campaign and splashed out between it, whereas with, the 64 you got like still images with some text. And so yeah, I did actually start off playing two of my favourite RTSs on Nintendo, so it's not to say that it can't be done, and I did enjoy it, but I didn't know what I was missing. As soon as it was on PC, I just never looked back.
Well, exactly, it's pretty qualitatively different, isn't it?
Yeah, because I do remember there was one game that I thought was interesting. I gave it a go just to give it the benefit of the doubt. Was Halo Wars? Did you ever play that?
Yes.
So that was interesting the way that it did that, but not a lot of replayability to it. There wasn't a lot of strategic diversity that you could sort of implement there, but again, it dumbed everything down and put your base as this one little blob, and so that all the buttons were corresponding to different blocks that you could build it in. So you couldn't design your own base.
Yeah.
It's silly stuff, because Command & Conquer did the same thing, and
Just for the audience, Halo Wars was an RTS that was developed explicitly for consoles.
Mm.
Yes. So anyway, carry on.
Yeah, so, and as far as I'd sort of played it, that was the first one that I'd played where that seemed to be the goal in mind, whereas I sort of did it backwards with Command & Conquer and StarCraft, because I just assumed it's like, oh, they were made for Nintendo, and then found out later, young, stupid me, that I was just playing the peasant version of it, and that there was this awesome original version that I should have been playing the whole time.
I see.
But yeah, I need that base building. I don't want it to be streamlined. It's like, the silly freedom, especially in a game like Warcraft, where, you've got these idyllic fantasy settings and stuff, and it's like, you build your little farm to give yourself 10 extra population to build your units or whatever, so it should just be this quantitative resource that you use, but it's like, I want to put that farm on a nice hill next to a nice tree somewhere, let me pick where it goes. Don't just give me some congealed blob in the middle of the map with buttons allocated to it. It's like, no, man. I want to shape my own city. I want to design it myself. I want there to be rows of farms neatly stacked together and, that sort of stuff.
So you feel that maybe what kind of pushed the genre to decline in the 2000s was a trend towards accessibility and designing for consoles and controllers?
That's sort of my personal opinion on it. I mean, without really understanding all the nuts and bolts of I suppose the economic side of things and exactly why they didn't make money and the kind of demographics they're working with. Because to me, any game that Blizzard makes is just pure gold. Like, they can do no wrong. Well, that's not true, but they've pissed me off plenty of times. But I will always forgive them. Like, if there's a Blizzard game coming out, I will always give it a go. Yeah, so without being an expert on all the economic stuff that goes into it and the demographics and so on and so forth, for me personally, there's also different kinds of strategy games, as we said before. We've talked about turn-based versus RTS, and then there's like grand strategy games. Mm-hmm. And to me, because I love the idea of grand strategy games, but you just get bored.
What are the grand strategy games?
So, like Total War, Victoria 2, I think, was one that a friend got me to play. I played all of 10, 15 minutes of it. I love the idea of it. It was basically just, the whole world and what have you, and you pick your country and sort of like Civilization, I guess.
Right.
More based on the campaign map, less combat focused, I suppose, than say an RTS. You're not so much dealing with the tactical sort of maneuvers of units. It's more just about resource management and territorial disputes and diplomacy and all that sort of stuff. So it's like as you would manage an actual campaign in a theatre of war, as opposed to actually fighting on the battle lines yourself.
I see, right. So it's a difference in emphasis, pretty much.
Yeah. So and again, I like the idea of them, but they get a bit boring after a while.
Right.
So there's lots of different kinds. So that's not to say that, obviously, I think we're mainly talking about RTS when we talk about the decline of it, because there's still plenty of Total War games coming out. They're fairly frequently made. Civilization's still going with turn-based strategy.
Yes, it is.
So for some reason, I don't know what it is about RTS, why that seems to suffer this sort of atrophy, I guess. Because, when StarCraft 2 was released, it was like, a 10 or 15 year gap, or some ridiculous gap. Too friggin' long.
Quite substantial, yeah.
Yeah. And everybody went bananas for it. I know that for me it was the most exciting thing. It was the first midnight release I'd ever gone to for a game, was to get StarCraft 2, and I could not wait to get it. And it was just like, the place was packed and all these other StarCraft nerds, and like, but I just don't know how much it appealed to new fans. I think maybe RTS is perhaps a little daunting to new fans wanting to come into it.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know, like FPS games and stuff, maybe it's just a bit more intuitive or self-intuitive. You can sort of anybody can pick up a controller and attempt to button mash in Tekken, or play a racing game or something like that. Like, a lot of the mechanics are sort of self-explanatory. If not, you can figure them out fairly quickly through experimentation.
Sure. Whereas
RTS, I guess it's a steeper learning curve, and there's a bit more time investment in it before you figure out how the economy works and what resources you need to prioritise, and and then of course what units do what, and if there's a rock paper scissors sort of battle between this unit type and that unit type, and then of course your ability to actually split and maneuver those forces effectively. So yeah, I guess it sort of plays like dances on this fine edge between wanting to make itself available to a broad range of people, but then for the fans or the people that are actually going to be really good at it, they don't want to be dumbed down too much.
Right. So there's a tension there that has to be managed, and developers, by and large, haven't quite managed that yet. Yeah,
and maybe that is just the biggest obstacle to it. Is just that a lot of criticisms are either that RTSs are too simple, and they're just they're no fun because you just can't lose, or there's not enough hands-on control of what's happening.
Can't build your farm on a hill with a nice tree.
Exactly. Yeah. Crucial stuff. Or the other end of the scale is just that it's far too complex. There's too many resources to manage. There's not enough time. You need to have a certain amount of digital dexterity to be able to just do basic things.
Yeah.
To even beat like the simplest AI, let alone another human player. So there's almost two extremes, and it's very difficult to find a balance in between. But
yeah,
I think that Warcraft 3 found that good balance because they sort of. Not to say they broke them all, because again, I'm not an expert on RTS history or anything. But say Command and Conquer and stuff like that, and Age of Empires, that was big, and you could have big swarms of units. You could control 100 or 200 at a time or what have you. And then Warcraft 3 comes along, and StarCraft did as well. Shrinks down the population size, like you had a population cap of 200, I think.
Okay.
I know you did in StarCraft. It's been a while since I've actually played Warcraft 3. Maybe it's only 100 in Warcraft. But anyway.
Right.
So smaller forces, but then you can only control 12 or 16 at a time or what have you.
Right.
So it's, squad-based, smaller population. So it's less micro-intensive. So, the APM stuff and the digital dexterity and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I think that's the thing that did well for it. It managed to bridge that gap. It found that happy medium that so few RTSs managed to find, where you can keep the people that are serious about it happy, and the people that are completely new, have never played an RTS before, and you're not going to scare them off.
Yeah.
Really hard balance to find.
Yeah, well, it seems kind of relevant to the general discussion that has been brewing and threatening to boil over of late, of the politics of accessibility in games generally.
Yeah.
Every time a difficult game comes out, this conversation is stoked again. It happens. It happens with every Souls game. Yeah. It happened with Cuphead.
It's Sekiro. Oh, Cuphead.
You remember the Cuphead controversy, right? Yeah. Particularly with regard to that Dean Takahashi, a journalist who he previewed Cuphead for an event, and his gameplay he self-admittedly wasn't terribly good.
Yeah.
And, he was good-natured about it and self-deprecating, and so it was fine. It's fine to just admit, this isn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But it ignited this huge controversy. There was a question as to exactly how, we won't get into this topic too extensively, but, about how skilled a game developer, a game journalist should be before they're able to start reporting on games. Like, there should be a kind of baseline of what is demanded of a player before they can be said to truly understand a game and its systems. And that's a conversation that's fraught with difficulty.
Yeah.
It seems that with RTS, there's an extra layer of complication. Because we've already referenced kind of how conceptually difficult RTS is. Because of the you're having to split your attention between different areas and try and think on your feet, so to speak.
Yeah.
At a pretty quick kind of pace. Otherwise you'll get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so then you mentioned digital dexterity. There is a manual component to this that we haven't touched on, in that you do kind of have to be dexterous with your hands and very quick and know exactly where you're going and what you want them to do.
Yeah, and memorise all the hotkeys and remember what does what. And,
well, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of question as to exactly, like, if that is the essence of RTS, it becomes a question as to exactly how scalable that is.
Yeah.
Or whether that kind of a demand for a sort of authentic experience of a genre might be limited to a certain subset of players who actually have that capacity both mentally and manually. Yeah.
Which is why, again, for me personally, as I've said before, I've had my dalliances with multiplayer in StarCraft and Warcraft, but ultimately I was all about the campaign, because it was, I think, maybe it was the level design or the AI design or something to begin with, but it was very accessible just to get through the basic campaign, and it had difficulty levels. You could choose how hard the AI was and all that sort of stuff if you want to verse potatoes or if you actually want to challenge and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So you could just play it for the story. And then, of course, you jump into multiplayer, and if you really want to test your skills and all that sort of stuff, I mean, you can just verse AIs in Skirmish, or you can play against human players, which is always a humbling experience when you try that for the first time. You get through the entire campaign, you're like, yeah, man, I just dominated everything, that was amazing, I'm the god of Warcraft, and then you get absolutely trounced 10 times in a row, and you're like, yeah, I'm no good at RTS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah, it's the same experience when you... I'm a big fan of fighting games, even though I'm not good at them. So I'm kind of... This is where I'm drawing an analogy here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that I really love Mortal Kombat and Tekken in particular.
Yeah.
And I'm Sub-Zero main, by the way, in Mortal Kombat. But, so I really enjoy playing them. And then the first time I played Mortal Kombat online, I'm like, yeah, I've got Sub-Zero, I know what I'm doing. And then a flawless victory from the other guy. I was not able to touch him. And so there is this vast gulf of skill between online and that really makes you start to think about your own validity. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah. And it's funny because with Blizzard in general, you know, because you and I play Overwatch quite a bit with the fam and all that, and we're forever picking on matchmaking and all that sort of stuff. And I think that, because that's the thing, it's like with a single player campaign, if you're building a game for a single player experience, it's fairly easy to control that and ramp the difficulty and keep things nice and in step with, you know, at this stage of the campaign you should have learned how to do X, Y, and Z, and now we'll get you to apply it against this enemy with this difficulty level. Whereas you jump into multiplayer and it's pretty hard to control the algorithms that are going to make sure that people of a similar skill set are matched up against each other, especially in a team game as well, like Overwatch, because then you have to do that 10 times over in all these different combinations as opposed to just, say, a one-on-one matchmaking in a fighting game.
Sure.
So it's almost like, I don't know, it's a hard one because game companies, they need to make good, enjoyable games, they need to be accessible. You know, for me personally, it's like I enjoy a lot of single player games. I enjoy multiplayer games, but predominantly I enjoy solo experiences and all that sort of stuff, so I don't want to see a campaign just being the tacked on thing and having multiplayer be a draw to a game. I hate that crap.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a multiplayer game, make a multiplayer game. If you want to make a single player game, make that the focus.
Sure.
But yeah, so there's lots of things to balance, but it's kind of like, well, at what point does it come down to game design versus get your matchmaking algorithms right? You know, because they're two entirely separate beasts, and you could get one perfect and completely screw up the other.
Sure.
So again, a game like Warcraft, as I said, you know, you could play the campaign and everything feels fair. No levels make you want to smash your keyboard and all that. And you can change the difficulty any time you want if you're really struggling.
Yeah.
And you know, and you gradually get better at the game. It just, you know, just as a natural progression through the campaigns. By the time you finish it, you feel like you've got a good grasp on everything. And then you jump into multiplayer and you just get matched up with some dude that's been playing multiplayer for 10 years or what have you, and they just absolutely demolish you. And even in my case, I've been playing these games for years and years and years, and I still get trounced. So it's just like, there's certain temperamental differences between people, I don't know, whatever it is, or skill in general.
Yeah. Well, these kind of nebulous concepts.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Yeah. So again, it's not overly fair to pick on just the game design itself when at the end of the day, if you're talking multiplayer especially, it's like there's a human element to it, and the competition, you know, between one human and another is always going to be inherently sort of unbalanced or unfair to some degree. Someone has to win in the end if that's the game you're designing, unless you are just playing a cooperative experience.
Yeah.
So I suppose at that stage it's not really the developer's responsibility to try to account for that. They just have to, I suppose the best thing they can do is just try to keep the actual mechanics of the game fair and balanced, and try to get those matchmaking algorithms right and let the rest play out.
Okay, alright. So difficulties of designing or balancing for multiplayer aside, it seems to me that, there are a few themes that have come up in discussion so far. It seems to me that to a certain degree there is a kind of unique mechanical set that defines an RTS. Yeah. And that if you try and make it more abstract, or you make it more accessible through streamlining it to a certain degree, it begins to be emptied of its sort of substance, and you end up not really playing the same game ultimately. Yeah. So it seems that like the integrity of the kind of the management systems and the way that you interact with the world in an RTS seems pretty important. On the other hand, part of the problem with RTS, and one of the reasons it declines in popularity, is the robustness and complexity of those systems. Yeah. So it seems to me maybe the idea is, okay, maybe we won't design RTSs for consoles. Maybe we'll understand that it's a PC-only thing, or should be. But let's maybe include in our tutorials not so much just our explicit mechanics, but our implicit mechanics. Because it seems that a lot of that stuff it has to be picked up by the players.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the concept of micromanagement.
Yeah.
Like, in no RTS game that I've ever tried has the game explicitly said, here is what micromanagement involves. I will then show you how to do it.
Yeah.
Or things like APM, like actions per minute.
Yeah.
No game has told me about this in the tutorial.
Yeah.
But maybe if if an RTS were to come out, if we want to try and kickstart a renaissance of the RTS into the 2020s.
Yeah.
Let's have this kind of an elegant kind of mix, like Warcraft 3 kind of served as an avant-garde example of a kind of an RPG with a more personal stories, RPG elements to kind of tie you into the fate of a specific character. Then kind of RTS elements, so you have that kind of interesting, kind of more zoomed out perspective and engagement with the core gameplay. Yeah. But then tutorials and mechanics that really get you into what's essential to play the genre as it's meant to be played. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's actually interesting because the only game that I can think of that actually did that was in StarCraft 2, and it wasn't always in there. I can't remember. Maybe it was patched in at some point, but I just accidentally stumbled across it one day. But there was like a challenge mode in that where it did actually teach you how to micro, and it was kind of like it would give you scenarios where it just creates a little level with a little block, and it gives you X amount of Marines, and it's telling you that this unit's going to come at you and explode, so you have to split this Marine and make him go that way and make him go that way, and this is how you do it.
Right.
And you get little ranks, your little bronze and silver and gold reward for how well you do it.
Sure.
And I thought it was great because for me, exactly what you just said, it's like the game never teaches you how to micro. It's like you just jump online, you get absolutely demolished by people that know how to split their forces and individually control and micromanage all their abilities, especially in Warcraft 3, because a lot of the units, as I said, they're smaller scale squads, and a lot of them have specific units. So one particular guy has a spell that he can cast that you have to activate. Some of them are auto-cast, some of them you have to actually activate yourself. So there's a lot more micromanagement potential in Warcraft 3 than a lot of other RTSs. So yeah, maybe that could be included in RTSs going forward. Make that a mainstay. It's like put in a challenge mode or something where it gives you scenarios where it's telling you, okay, split these forces, use this unit to cast this ability, and we're going to rank you based on your efficiency and how you've done that and how many of your units survive this onslaught and how many die or how quickly you manage to get things done. I thought it was a really cute thing that they put in StarCraft, and it did make me wonder why it wasn't actually put into more RTSs. So maybe that could be something that's put into RTSs going forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just specific micro challenges.
Okay. Alright, well, on that front, let's talk about Warcraft 3's kind of legacy. It is certainly a game that has cast a very long and very deep shadow over the rest of the kind of the games as a medium going forward.
Yeah, almost annoyingly so if you're not a fan, but for me being a fanboy, it's like I love it. I love the shadow that it casts. So many people complain about that being the benchmark for MMOs, and I just don't care because I loved WoW. I'm like, I'll get stuff that's the benchmark. It's
we'll get to that. We'll get to WoW in just a hot second.
Yeah, all right.
But about Warcraft 3 in particular. So, Warcraft 3 is often held up as kind of like an archetypal RTS. Like, if you want to understand the RTS, Warcraft 3 is a good place to go to it. Why do you think that is? What is it about Warcraft 3 that makes it so unique in its genre?
Well, again, particularly for people that are new to RTS, if that's going to be your introduction, it's a really good introduction to it, just because it does have a smaller unit count. It's a lot more basic. There's only, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but there's only 2 resources to collect. There's just wood and gold. Yeah. And then you just have to manage your population. Your bases don't have to be massive and sprawling. Like there's, what would you call it? Like, less is more sort of thing. So it's like there's greater weight to each individual unit. So in a game, say like Command and Conquer, where you build a rifleman squad or you have like 50 riflemen and then they just get run over by one mammoth tank, you're like, well, great. In Warcraft, that one basic infantry unit is actually, I don't know, exponentially stronger than, say, how they are in Command and Conquer. So it's smaller unit scale. Each unit has more weight. So there's more impact. You feel like you're achieving more. So I think for again, someone getting into it from a beginner's perspective, it wouldn't feel as futile as, say, playing a game like Command and Conquer, where you can just have all your riflemen just run over by one tank, and the last hour's work is just for nothing.
That's tragic.
So definitely accessibility and difficulty are there, but again, I just think the big thing is a really good plot, really awesome characters to really draw you in and make you care about it, or give you a reason to care about what you're doing and why you're doing it, all this sort of stuff. Like, I can't overstate enough. Just like that's you could take the RTS out of Warcraft 3 and give me it in some other genre, and I would still enjoy the plot. Which is kind of what they did with WoW, so I suppose it's not really true, because I definitely prefer that they make Warcraft 4 as opposed to another bloody WoW expansion. But you know what I mean. Like, so the plot itself stands on its own 2 feet,
right?
Whereas with a lot of other RTSs, it does very much more seem to be just catering to, like, the mechanics of the game are the game, and the plot kind of just feels tacked on.
Gotcha. Whereas
Warcraft is a bit more, it's a nice fusion between the mechanics and the actual gameplay, and there's decent plot with cool characters that you actually care about, that you get to control. You know, you've got your hero unit that you get to see in the cinematics and hear them talking, and they're really badass, and they've got all these special abilities and all that, and then you get to actually control them. So again, it just adds that extra layer of, you know, a reason to care, as opposed to just a bunch of faceless copies of the same soldier sprite over and over again.
Right.
Now you've got this one dude that is part of the story, he's integral to the story, or she is integral to the story, and you get to control them yourself.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think that's it. Yeah. Accessibility, good game design, beautiful art style as well. Like, again, I think a lot of people have also complained about the fact that Warcraft's art style has sort of become a thing that's spread into other areas as well, even within their own games. And it has annoyed me too. Say Diablo 3 came out, and I love Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, and it had a very distinct art style, and StarCraft had a very distinct art style from Warcraft, so all of them were quite distinct. Whereas now StarCraft 2 comes out and Diablo 3 comes out, and they've all got that very bulky, sort of big hand, big feet, sort of strange cartoonish proportion that came from the Warcraft art style.
Right.
So it's a very cool art style, but yeah, I mean, again, you either love it or you could, you know, pick on it for the fact that it's like these games did have their own unique art style, but now they've sort of homogenized all of their brands to take this same art style and merge it together.
I guess, yeah. When you have one series in particular that is as successful as Warcraft, it's perhaps not surprising that the other siblings would like to latch on and try and suck some of those nutrients. Mine more minerals, maybe, for Warcraft. Alright, so we can't really talk about Warcraft's legacy without talking about the 2 little red-headed children that it spawned, and we'll go with the smaller one first. That being, again, a little game called Defense of the Ancients, or DotA, which began life as a mod for Warcraft 3, in the same way that Counter-Strike, a huge industry titan, began life as a mod for Half-Life. So, can you tell us a little bit about DotA?
Well, it's good that we're starting with this first, because my experience with Dota is far less than it is with WoW. But my experience with Dota, it was interesting because it was just, like, there was a friend that I had in high school, pretty much coincided with me getting that first PC. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't really get a good PC at home until I was like 12 or 13 or something like that. But I'd go around to this friend's place, and he was the first friend I ever LANed with, so lots of nostalgia is attached, not to the Blizzard games, not just for the games themselves, but also the time that I was playing these and introduced to them with this friend of mine. And we pretty much spent all of our time playing Warcraft 3, either tower defense or Dota. And I loved Dota. I loved the concept of it. I loved just getting to control that one hero unit as opposed to having a whole army. It took the best part that I enjoyed the most about Warcraft 3 and was just like, well, hey, how about this is all you do? You don't even have to worry about an army.
Right.
Which I thought was really, really cool and cute. But that was kind of it. That was my experience with it. And I, like, as I said, we played it non-stop. Like, whenever I go around to his place, we would play at least a round or two of Dota, whether against each other, AI, or other players online, or what have you.
Okay.
And it was just this cute map mod, this custom map that someone had made, and I never really thought much of it. Until years later, I'm finding out that, it's a game in and of itself now, and that, like Defense of the Ancients and League of Legends and all this stuff has now sprung out of it, and I'm going, hang on, is that like Dota as in Defense of the Ancients, like that map from years back that I played around at Tony's house? And it's just like, yeah. Like, that's a thing now, and I'm like, oh, Jesus. Like, yeah, so it really surprised me that it had become its own genre, but it shouldn't have surprised me, just given how fun it was, and that was the custom game that everybody was playing. Like, we'd jump online and you go into looking for a match in skirmish, and it was far harder to get a match in that than, say, opposed to Dota. You just jump in and you get people leaping on it wanting to play it. So, yeah, so as it just, it was a surprise that it became its own thing, and just really cool, just to think back that it's like such humble beginnings, and I never saw it coming, and just that used to just be some cute game that me and a friend played against each other, and then became an entire franchise in and of itself that then spawned a genre. And then, of course, Blizzard wanted to get back in on it, after Dota and LoL, and it's like, well, hey, hang on, this started with us, so maybe we should give it a go, and they brought out HOTS, which I don't actually think has been anywhere near as successful as either of its predecessors.
HOTS being Heroes of the Storm.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's kind of funny that it's kind of like Blizzard, in a roundabout way, spawned the genre, but of the three games, I think people that are serious about the MOBA genre, it's like, they would probably rank it last in terms of the ones that they would take seriously or give the most amount of respect to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of funny how that happened, and it just got away from Blizzard organically on its own. Right.
So you mentioned that Dota kind of springs out of an interesting sort of design element, which is one of the core features of Warcraft, which made it distinct among RTSs, was the kind of elaborate hero mechanic. The emphasis placed on that in ordinary games. And so the idea makes sense. What if we had an entire game focused around this?
Yeah.
So how exactly does how does Dota work? What makes it distinct from Warcraft 3 in a way that helped to delineate this type of game as a new genre as opposed to just a new spin on the RTS?
Well, again, I suppose, because, that makes you wonder, because with the original Defense of the Ancients map, it's kind of like, would it have worked as well if you still had a base to build and there were lanes to push, but you still had to build your base and build your own units and all that sort of stuff, and you had to control those units instead of them just being automated waves that would crash against each other? And maybe it wouldn't have. So I guess it's interesting that it's sort of still in that environment where there's still an army and there's a battlefield and there's huge forces playing, but I guess you getting to feel like you're the general of that army.
Right.
Maybe there's an extra sense of empowerment in it that, it's like, if these two forces just hit each other, it's just like a neutral, never-ending game of tug-of-war that's never going to go anywhere, but then you march onto the battlefield and you start turning the tide and all that sort of stuff, so I guess that plays into the whole, especially in the fantasy setting, it's that very fantasy trope of like, the hero comes in and he wins the war, which we know doesn't happen in real life,
right?
But, it's good in books and movies and stuff, and you get to play that out in MOBAs, and I think maybe that's what it's sort of about, is just that, it really entrenches that feeling of like, I'm the reason this epic battle is being won. It's not a matter of like sitting back and being what do they call them? Like an armchair general. It's like, no, I'm the hero that's turning the tide myself. And
right.
So maybe there's something in that.
Okay. That sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me that it's a spark that could sort of ignite this passion among so many players as it has.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it makes sense, because I just felt like I just completely pulled that out of my ass. But
I think you were feeling around for something. And you grabbed it in the end.
Yeah,
the whole concept of the because it seems to be more more relatable in a direct way. Than it makes more sense, a kind of narrative in which you have this sort of a stalemate of eternal war that is, but eventually the contribution of just one person is a kind of a poetry to that. That enables the tides to be turned and for a decisive end to be reached. Yeah,
and even in a broader sense, it's like we would like to feel that that's the way the world is, even if it isn't.
Yeah,
that one person can make that kind of difference.
Yeah.
So I suppose any gameplay that can sort of tap into any of our sort of latent desires and stuff, and these subconscious things that we would like to see happen in the real world, not so much in a really abstract sense that completely disconnects it from the real world, but just that there's enough of a connection where you can almost imagine it happening. Oh, again, I've lost that thought. So.
All right then. Well, so much for Dota. But now let's talk about the second of Warcraft 3's Kiddlywinks. Which is, I think we can say without exaggeration, one of the most historically important games ever made.
Yeah.
It's redefined the MMORPG. It has kind of stamped its own form as the kind of the benchmark that has to be met. And as of yet, no one has done it. It has sat for 15 years upon its throne as the number one MMORPG, which for fans listening who aren't aware, it stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game.
A mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful, that's why we abbreviate it.
Yeah.
So yes, it helped to redefine the genre away from the sort of EverQuest days and Ultimate days of its youth, and muds back in the day, and helped to turn it into something completely transformed it. And so it has sat for 15 years upon this throne, and dozens of pretenders have tried to come for it, and none have survived.
Yeah.
This is World of Warcraft, or WoW as we have alluded to it.
Yeah.
So, what is WoW? Is the first question for you, and why did it become so huge?
Well, it's again going back to like the first sort of foreshadowing of WoW. In Warcraft 3, with the expansion of the Frozen Throne, there was this funny little campaign that was sort of tacked on at the end, which always annoyed me that it wasn't sort of... You had to download each episode. It was...
Really?
Yeah, so you played through the main campaigns, and there was no orc campaign in the expansion, which really sucked.
Right.
But then you had this extra thing that was sort of tacked on, and that told the story of what was going on with the orcs in that main story, but you didn't play it in the traditional sense of, building your base knowledge. You just played it through the control of one hero character.
Okay.
And it was all just custom map style sort of stuff. It's like they built these maps where you'd wander around and... sorry, again, to go back... Even in Warcraft 3, the base game, as you're walking around in the levels, occasionally you find little characters there with little exclamation marks, denoting that there's little side quests that you can do beyond what you're doing in the general map and the controlling of your armies and whatnot.
Oh, I see.
So what happened with this campaign, the founding of DotA, so they, rather than doing an orc campaign, they gave you control of this one character who was like a half orc, half ogre or some such from memory.
Mm-hmm.
And you just controlled him, and it was entirely that system. It was no more army stuff, no more real base building. It was just you wandering around, and the whole game was like, hey, he's a dude with a little exclamation mark, and you'll pick up quests and do this, that, and the other. And it was almost like it was this tiny little tease as to their idea about WoW. That
right.
Rather than having a whole army, this would be the game. You would be this one hero with, RPG progression and leveling up and abilities and so on and so forth. And this is what the game's going to be, and this is what it could be.
Mm.
And then, so that was just a cute little thing that I thought at the time.
Right.
And then when WoW came out and actually seeing it implemented, and I think the thing for me, and again, everybody would have a different opinion on this, and there'd be more technical opinions and so on and so forth. But for me personally, what I loved about WoW and why I only ever really got into WoW and no other MMO is purely because WoW was set in the Warcraft universe. It didn't even have any... Obviously, the mechanics were good and enjoyable. If it was a terrible game, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. But, but the thing that drew me to it was just the amazement of being able to walk around, in a third-person perspective, like down on the ground, up close and personal with these huge landmarks and these areas that have been in this game franchise that I've been playing for years and years.
Yeah.
Getting to go to the sites of battles that you controlled your armies in, in Warcraft 3 back in the day, and certain cinematics that played out. Like one of the coolest cinematics in all of Blizzard history was Thrall and Hellscream fighting Manaroth, this demon dude. I don't know how much context you want me to give, but Warcraft nerds will get it.
Sure.
So, two cool orcs fight big demon boss.
Gotcha.
Wicked cinematic. Absolutely awesome cinematic that ends with Hellscream smashing his axe into this demon's chest, and then he explodes in massive fiery ball and kills Hellscream and all that. In WoW, you could walk to this canyon and see what the demon fire's done to it and all that sort of stuff, and there's a memorial there to Hellscream. And getting to walk up to that with your little character who's a nobody in the as far as the Warcraft plot's concerned, and to stand there and see all this and stand there and be like, this is where that fight happened, and really put you in the moment. So it was kind of cool. And again, with what we were talking about before, how RTSs it sort of pulls you away from everything. It keeps you at a distance, and it's a bit harder to forge connections with what's going on.
Yeah.
And then WoW came along and put you in that perspective. So, if anything, the two games had to go hand in hand, for me personally anyway. To play one and not the other is just a serious loss.
Yeah.
Because, that was one of my favourite parts, was just not even about the actual gameplay itself, but just walking into a new area and going like, I remember playing this map, or I remember this event happening here, and getting to stand there and look at it as a little person on the ground staring up at this awesome thing. So for me it worked because of that.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think, again, it did that good, it struck that good balance between accessibility and ease of use, and the interface was, it was a little bit janky to begin with, but it was intuitive, and it worked, and it was customizable and all that. But again, they've refined it more and more as the expansions have gone on. But yeah, to the point now that you see other MMOs come in and they've still got the same use of the hotkeys and and the skill bars and all that, and it just looks like a Warcraft clone, like a WoW clone, just because it's like there isn't really any other real formula you can use, or it's hard to imagine anyway. I'm not a game designer.
It's so dominant.
Yeah,
it's hard to see outside of its kind of the formula that it helped to incarnate.
Yeah, because I do remember one other MMO that I played briefly was Guild Wars 2.
Yes.
And they kind of changed the formula up a little bit. They simplified things. Again, I can't remember exactly how it worked, but they tried to change the formula a little bit, and there were certain things that were kind of cute about it, but in the end it was a little bit too simple.
Right.
Yeah. It's even when MMOs fail when they try too hard to be like WoW, and then if it's not enough like WoW, then it's also not good enough. So it's like, good luck trying to build any MMO. Really, I have no idea how you're going to do it.
That's why, like, that was a minor craze in the late 2000s.
Yeah.
Was trying to build any MMO that received a significant amount of publicity.
Yeah.
There are small MMOs that are coming out all the time, even to this day. But when you had things like, for example, The Matrix Online. Or Lord of the Rings Online.
Yeah.
These sorts of ideas. Star Trek Online.
Yeah.
Every developer would have a crack at developing an MMO, trying to go for World of Warcraft's crown.
Yeah.
And every time they were marketed like, is this the new WoW killer? In the same
man, that annoyed me so much. It's like, fair enough, you want to set WoW as the benchmark, but it's like, is that your marketing? Is that the best you've got? It's like, this is going to kill WoW. It's like, oh, good on you. It's like, your game just, yeah. That's your aim. You want to destroy another franchise. It's like, never mind just trying to build a good game that people are going to enjoy.
Well, sure.
It's like, it just felt like a dick-swinging thing more than anything. It's just like, just try and build your own game. Forget about WoW. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. You need to compare it and you need to compete, but it's like, you can't make a game in a vacuum, but it's just like, maybe part of the problem was too much focus on WoW instead of just build your own damn game. Try and make something good and engaging for people. It's just like, who cares how much money they're making?
Yeah.
Build your own thing. Because I mean, you can see a lot of really cool. There's some cool indie games and like just real small scale stuff. Like there's this one. What the hell's it called? A friend of mine got me to play it. Space Station 13 or something.
Right.
Have you heard of that?
No.
It's janky as hell.
Is it an MMO?
Effectively, yeah. I guess you could call it that. Yeah, it's just like this 2D platformer thing where you get dropped in and you're on a space station. And it's really, like, unintuitive and terrible, but that's kind of half the fun. And yeah, you get dropped into roles, so you're either a medic or a janitor or what have you, and there are some servers that are very specific on, like, you have to play the part, and if you don't, if you do things out of character, then you'll be booted and all the rest. So they encourage real RPG engagement stuff. And that's just some crummy-looking 2D thing that's just, and again, really unintuitive, but still has a massive, like, rabidly loyal fan base and stuff, and people that have spent a long time trying to figure out all the nuts and bolts to it, because it's a virtually impenetrable game.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it still has this massive fan base, and it's like, they didn't have the big budget, they weren't trying to copy WoW, so it doesn't have to be a WoW clone to be successful. It's like, if you can just create an environment that people can share in, and be immersed in, and all the rest of it. As I said, WoW had it easy because it was building on an already established universe.
Yeah.
And it had the nostalgia factor, as I said before, when you get to walk into an area and be like, this is where that epic battle happened. So I got to borrow off that. It wasn't trying to build a new universe. So they had the ease of, not only were they building a new genre, a new game type mechanically, but they didn't also have to contend with the fact that it's like, well, we've also got to build a plot and characters to fill it with. They already sort of had half the work done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely made it easier for them because that way they could spend more time, I guess, just probably focusing on the mechanics and how they were going to get it to work. Whereas a lot of other people, it's like when you're building from the ground up, you've got to come up with the plot, characters, all the rest of it. And then on top of that, in the back of your mind, you're going like, and we've got to beat WoW. Yeah, or at least, be compared to it kindly or generously enough that we're not so terrible that, we're just not even worth looking at.
Yeah. Okay, that's yeah. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, that's interesting. I noticed I've been saying that a lot over the course of this episode.
I've been waffling a lot, so maybe I'm not leaving much else to say.
Oh, no. Part of it's just my own position, not being a Warcraft fan and not having played terribly much of WoW either.
Yeah.
But it seems, even, I think maybe a unique perspective is sometimes helpful. Someone standing outside, trying to see what the appeal is.
Yeah.
And the way that you described why you think WoW is such a big deal, certainly it explained a lot of it to me. Because the description that you gave of transitioning from a kind of remote God's eye view of this process that you've observed happening over years and years of games, and following this narrative develop over 3 games, and then being able to walk in a third-person way, in a way that's a lot more intimate and personal, particularly given that you are walking in the context of, you're walking in the shoes, literally, of your own character that you've made. So the journey has, in an instant, become more personal and become more relatable, because the avatar represents you in a certain sense. And so then you walk and you see directly in front of you the history that you're familiar with, and you can see literally how it has shaped the world that you now inhabit. It kind of seems like to be emblematic of what this show is about, of the force that history plays in the development of the present. That we see in that kind of that gesture of going to an area where a battle happened and being able to see how the world has the effects have kind of rippled out from there, being able to see all the consequences. It's kind of like, so you see that the influence that Warcraft 3, it has been literally a monument has been erected to it within WoW itself. Yeah,
which almost, if you'd played Warcraft 3 and that was your experience coming into it, it almost gave you that feeling of weight, that what you did, because as I said before, say, with the battles, the levels not really feeling like irrelevant to the plot and all the rest of it, but then suddenly walking in on this in WoW and walking through one of the battlefields that you commanded your 100 dudes to fight on that was just another level back then, now suddenly had weight, because it's like, oh, hang on, I did this. It's like, I controlled the forces that created this battlefield that we now see, or... so again, it giving you that extra connection to make you feel like not only you connected to the world and the characters through an emotional connection, but because you feel like in some abstract way you've personally had a hand in creating the history of that moment.
Yeah.
And again, you know, as gamers, we all love to have that sense of agency and control, like we're contributing to the narrative and all the rest of it. So any game that can do that well, I think, is like that's a big thing, I think, and that's again why games like Dark Souls and stuff work as well as they do, because it does make you feel like you're contributing to the plot. You're not just a passenger. It's not like you're watching a movie. It's like without you, the plot doesn't advance, and it really has that weight to what you do.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good reason for something to be as successful as WoW is. Have a license to print money for over a decade.
Yeah, well, and shit. The amount of times as well, like, and it just, there are a lot of different options in WoW, like things that you can do. I mean, you could just sit there and fish, and it's not even a good fishing game. It's terrible. You just click a button and you drop your thing in, and depending on your stats and RNG, you may get a fish or you may not. And yet when I started doing it, I sat there and fished in a little pond, for, like 2 hours. You know, there's a whole game to play. There's the enemies to kill and things to level up and loot to get. And there I am just fishing in a pond, just trying to level up my fishing skill. And there was something very therapeutic about it. So it's, again, I think any RPG where you can just sort of sit back and just smell the roses too. It's like, again, just to put that in perspective as well, a lot of MMOs, they don't have the sort of world design that makes you care. It's like, WoW, there's so many set pieces that you walk in and just make you go like, holy shit, like, look at that. You just stop and you're not playing the game. You're just looking at it and marveling at the grandeur of it, and your small little character standing at the foot of this massive monument or mountain, or, coming out, into, like a dense forest and into this big open field or something, just this sense of grandeur that came as part of just really beautiful actual game design and level design. So if you don't get that right, it's like, if with an RPG, it's like, there's a sort of sense of like, you want to imagine yourself living there. You want to live there in some sense or another. As irrational as that would be, it's like, with demons roaming about and, people wanting to cut your throat and burn your village down. It's like, you wouldn't really want to live in Azeroth, but
right.
That does have this idyllic sort of feel to it, that you can take a break from all the wars and just go fish in a pond, and, and it's nice.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be an element of that in any game, but particularly with MMOs. It's like, give me a reason to care about the world. It's like you build this big, expansive world.
Yeah.
Where you have all these human players and NPCs and stuff, but if it feels empty and unpopulated and, the environments are a bit drab, it's like, well, you're not going to care. But again, as I said, WoW had that advantage of already having an existing universe to build on to begin with, but, yeah.
Okay. So through WoW and its 15,000 million expansions, we arrive at the present. And so the Warcraft 3 remaster, Warcraft 3 Reforged, is just around the bend. And so a lot of people are very excited about that, you included.
Oh, yeah, cannot wait. Yeah.
So I think that the very fact that the remaster has generated so much excitement and so much interest indicates that Warcraft 3, on its own, notwithstanding the contributions that its children, so to speak, have made to gaming history in general, having inaugurated a genre and having redefined another for decades, it seems that game in particular still has a lot of affection, or still commands a lot of affection, has a fond place in many people's hearts. Yeah. It certainly seems to do with you from the way you've been talking about it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So, what is it in particular that you love about the game? And do you think people will still be playing it in 50 years?
Oh, I mean, I know I would be, if I still can.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's the story and the characters that are just the most enduring part of it. I can go back and play a lot of RTSs just to enjoy the mechanics of it and have, a little bit of fun and, play 2 or 3 hours and get bored. As I said to you earlier, I think before we started recording, I was talking about playing Command and Conquer and kind of lost interest very quickly. Whereas WoW, it's kind of like, Warcraft 3, it's
Oops.
Just getting to relive that plot again and again. It's like picking up a book that you've read, a dozen times, or watching a movie that you've watched, 100 times. I could quite happily play that game again and again and again just to absorb the plot again and enjoy the characters. There's just so many good characters in it. Arthas, like the Lich King, is just one of the biggest badasses in all video game history as a villain. Just one of the coolest villains there is. He's like up there with like Sephiroth and stuff. It's just so the characters are the biggest draw for me, and the plot lines. With what you were saying about people getting back into it and how much of a special place it holds, I think there are a lot of people that are really happy about Warcraft 3 because they almost felt snubbed with WoW. Yeah. Because you had Warcraft 1, 2, 3, all successful in their own ways. Warcraft 3, wildly successful, and then the expansion for it, Frozen Throne, was amazing. And it left it at this really cool point in the plot where probably 2 of the coolest characters are Arthas, who I mentioned before, the Lich King, the big bad guy, the leader of the undead, fighting Illidan, this night elf dude. So it's this really cool thing as well, because Illidan's sort of presented as a villain to begin with, but he's sort of like redeemed in the end, and he's sort of, I don't know, like this sort of neutral anti-hero sort of character. Okay. So when it comes to Arthas, who starts as a paladin, gets corrupted, becomes a Lich King, and then in the end, at the end of the plot line, at the end of Frozen Throne, they both fight each other, and it's sort of like the fallen hero versus the redeemable villain. It's just this really cool showdown between the two of them.
Interesting.
And that ends with like a pretty lackluster sort of like in-game type cinematic, not like the full like rendered ones and stuff, like the 3D ones. Shame. So hopefully with the remake we'll get to see like because I'm pretty sure they're remaking all the cinematics as well, which would be amazing if they do a proper one for that. So anyway, so that's where we were left off, and then WoW comes out, and there were a lot of people that were really excited, and as I said, getting to step foot into that world, at a more up-close and personal perspective. But then there were a lot of fans of Warcraft 3 that were worried that it's like, well, hang on, we really love the RTS game, and we want to see the plot continued through that. Yeah. So they thought, I think they hoped in vain that maybe there'd be, an expansion or 2, and then there'd be Warcraft 4, but here we are, 8 expansions into WoW, and the plot's just spiraled out of control ridiculously, like absolutely insane. Like the second expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, Arthas dies, and then it's like, well, what's left to care about now? Like, he was the biggest badass, and you killed him in the second expansion, and now we're like 4 or 5 expansions later. It's like, stop caring back at Wrath of the Lich King, man. So people just they want Warcraft 4, but then there's sort of been this question about like, how the hell would they ever do that? Are they ever going to do it? The plot's so messed up, they can't just pick up from where Warcraft 3 left off. Are they going to take off after WoW while WoW's still running and they're still adding content to it? But I read an article the other day that was these people are sort of there's rumours or maybe just a vain hope that what's going to happen with Warcraft 3 Reforged is that it may actually spark a reboot of the series. Right. So that because they've already said that they are going to change some things, like they're going to keep it very, loyal to the original game and all sorts. So they don't want to change anything mechanically or anything. They just sharpen everything up. But they have said vaguely, hinted at, they are going to make some minor plot and character changes just to be in keeping with like the the impact that WoW's lore has had. So certain things that happen, like even just like level design, you know, like in a certain map, they're now going to redesign that particular map to reflect what it looked like in WoW.
Right.
And they haven't really said much more than that, but everybody's really worried, going like, oh, what are they going to retcon to fit WoW? Because WoW's canon's just completely retarded, and now they're going to, you know, they're going to try and bring that into Warcraft 3 and ruin everything.
Sure.
But again, it also carries with it this promise that maybe if that's the direction they're going in, they might just reboot it and have Warcraft 4 become an alternate timeline. So they will get to take off from there, get back into making RTSs for the Warcraft storyline, and have WoW just be this, you know, adjacent running sort of parallel universe type thing. So that way we get to have the best of both worlds, which I'd be happy with. I think that'd be amazing, because I loved WoW. I didn't begrudge it for sort of taking over the story, but I do miss just playing the RTS version of Warcraft, and I'd love to see Warcraft 4 if that ever happes.
Right.
So, yeah, if Reforged leads to that, then, yeah, that'd be amazing.
Sounds like a nice compromise between the two kind of sects of the fan base.
Yeah, and as I said, it just seems to be the only way that they could go forward, because there's no way they can't just ignore WoW and then just pick up the story where Warcraft 3 left off.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's like too much time has passed now to go from what the last WoW expansion and then jump back into an RTS would just feel so disjointed. And again, I think they're still intent on building content for WoW, so they're not going to abandon that while that's still making money to then go back into RTS.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it'd be good. That way we get, as I said, the best of both worlds. They can have both running parallel.
Well, I think I've learned a lot. I hope that any of my listeners who may have been interested in Warcraft but haven't really, or been too daunted by the kind of complexity of RTS mechanics to really get into it, have feel a kind of stronger urge to maybe give it another try, perhaps when the remaster comes out.
Yeah, definitely, man. Just play it for the story, and if you're not going to play it, look up YouTube videos or something. Just the characters are amazing, the plot's amazing. It's convoluted, and it's, you know, we're not talking like, you know, really nuanced plot and characters. Like it's pretty basic, sort of, you know, very by the numbers high fantasy stuff. But I love that shit. It's just like I don't care. It doesn't have to break the mold. It just has to be good characters and a cool plot that I care about. And it's just filled with it. There's you know, 4 or 5 different races that you can play, and all the heroes from those particular races and all their interactions with each other. And again, you go back and you read the wikis and stuff for Warcraft 1 and 2, which I had to do to get caught up on the story. Yeah. And there's comic books and novels, and I mean, there's a movie that was really average. Yeah, there's heaps of it out there, and just the universe is amazing to explore. So even if you don't play the games, just I don't know, pick up one of the books or something, because the story's amazing, the characters are amazing, and if you ever, you know, really feel like just dipping your toe into the RTS waters, Warcraft 3 is a really good place to start. Yeah.
Well, the kind of mandate of the show is to talk about games which both affect people on a personal level, but which also are historically pretty important to the development of the medium that succeeded them. And Warcraft 3 is one of the probably the most titanic instances of a game of that sort. A game which is both beloved by millions of people, and which itself is the kind of springboard for so much of the history that followed it. Like, with the MOBA genre, which is very big right now, and the MMO, which dominated the latter half of the 2000s. And WoW is still going with, like, tens of millions of subscribers every month paying their dues. That game has a stranglehold upon its particular genre that has not relented for 15 years. So if you want to understand that, Warcraft 3 is the beginning of those roads, so to speak. So I think it's pretty important game to check out. Yeah,
and it's funny, just a quick, just to add onto that as well. I mean, it's such a successful franchise, so much so that it's like a cool hip thing to not be on the Warcraft bandwagon. Yeah. You know, it's like to hate on it is like cool. You're either, you know, you're with it and you just, you know, you're one of those mindless WoW nerds, or, you know, you're the cool edgy guy that's like, nah man, WoW sucks. You know, I play real MMOs like Guild Wars or what have you. But again, it's like, but to go back to Warcraft and see where that started and stuff, and just, I don't know, just the fact that a franchise can become so successful that it becomes a benchmark for so many others, and much to the chagrin of non-fans and to the, you know, endless enjoyment of the actual fans. It's just sort of got this life of its own. I've completely lost where I was going with that. Oh, man.
Man, the only real MMO that you can play, the only real MMO for real fans, is RuneScape Classic. That's how you do it.
I only ever played that a little bit. I really regret not playing that more. I had a lot of friends that played it at the time, but I thought it looked lame. I was busy playing Diablo 2 at the time, so I was just like, nah, there's better games to play. Another Blizzard classic that you should definitely play.
I'll get on it. Well, thank you very much for joining the show, Josh. It was good to have you on.
Cheers, man.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I hope to see you very soon.